1. A campground? I gulped back a good hissy fit, because no one could ever underestimate the power of a good hissy fit, something I've tried really hard not to do in years. As in tiny little metal houses and porta-potties?
Well, I think they have a toilet in them, said Stanley Shelton, my lawyer. He eased back in his big, fancy, wingback leather chair, with his elbows resting on the wooden arms, and his fingers drumming against each other. The gray pinstriped suit was of the finest materials, and the nice crystal cufflinks were the touch it needed that screamed successful lawyer. I think the toilet is small, but you're small.
He rubbed his hand over his bald head and then proceeded to draw his hand over his mustache and beard. I tried as hard as I could to keep it together, but my composure was under attack. What about my house in the Hamptons? I'll just go there. I let out a sigh of relief. It was a perfect plan. I'm desperately going to miss the New York City apartment, but I need a break. Unfortunately, it wasn't going to change the fact that my now ex-husband was in jail for a Ponzi scheme. He kept me busy by sending me to the spa, salon, and shopping for most of our 2-year marriage. Not to mention, I'd cashed out my 401k to help him start a side business where he said we'd be partners. Little did I realize it was partners in a crime.
And the house is gone.
Stanley's jaw set.
I'm going to need the keys to your car and trade you for these.
He dangled a very small key from a flamingo keychain in the air. What's that? A moped key? I joked.
It's to your house and your new car.
He glanced out the window of his fancy office that was filled with plaques and certificates that boasted of his high education. You can't even look at me? Because I clearly remember when we were donating to your son-in-law's election fund and visiting our friends in the community who ended up being big donors, that you had no issue looking at me. And now that my bank account has taken a hit, you won't even look at me? I questioned with a slight bitter taste in my mouth.
It didn't take a hit. There's no bank account. The FBI seized it all.
Stanley made no effort to make me feel the slightest bit better about my situation. Where is my new house? The Upper East Side? Not that that's a bad place to live, but not like where we live now.
He licked his lips. Out there.
He pointed to the window. I sat up a little straighter in my chair and leaned on the arm of the leather chair. There's nothing out there but an RV, a small one at that. I laughed and eased back into the chair. Wait, you mean that? My voice trailed off when I noticed he didn't find amusement in my teasing about the camper.
I'm afraid that there's no money to give you. The only thing free and clear are the camper and the campground.
He stood up and walked around the desk. He eased down on the edge.
I'm sorry, Mae. You don't deserve this.
Are you sure? I asked. I mean, I was having a real bad day before I got here, but this just made it almost unbearable. I rested my elbow on the arm of the chair and covered my mouth with my hand. I twisted my head to the side so Stanley couldn't see my tearing up. There was a glimpse of my silhouette in the door of the mini refrigerator. My hazel eyes were sunken with half-moon dark circles under them. I'd not taken the time to straighten my long brown curly hair, and the humidity in the air wasn't making it any better.
Mae?
Stanley said my name. I blinked a few times. I didn't recognize the image staring back at me. Sorry, I apologized and forced a demure smile. I was having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that I had nothing. No family, no marriage, no place to live, no car, nothing. I mean, Paul is a jerk, and I'd like to kill him, but he left me with nothing? I hugged my designer bag to my chest. That scum. I couldn't believe that I was so dumb that I put everything in his name.
He owed a lot of people money, and some still don't have their retirement back. You're lucky I could salvage this in the settlements, since he did have it in your name alone."
He sounded as if I needed to thank Paul. Stanley picked the flamingo keychain up and once again stuck it in my face.
"The campground is in Normal, Kentucky."
"Kentucky?" My jaw dropped. "You mean I have to go there?" My mind rolled back to the last time I was in Kentucky. It was 2:04 a.m. I knew the exact time because it was the time I was born, and also my 18th birthday. It was the day I grew up and knew that no one was going to give me a free ride. Somehow, Paul made me feel safe and secure. Until now.
"You have to go there and be the manager if you want to have some sort of income, or we can look at selling the place."
He didn't move those darn keys. I didn't even know about this campground. I shook my head, refusing to take the keys. I've certainly never been a manager of a campground.
When Paul was in college, he somehow ended up at this campground and winning some silly bet. After the two of you were married, he had me put the deed in your name and your name alone. The FBI couldn't seize it.
Stanley thumbed through some papers on his desk.
"Lucky me," I groaned. "You have a camper to live in and a way to acquire some income."
He pushed himself up off the desk and put a hand on my shoulder.
"I suggest you take a trip. Make it an adventure. Check the place out and save up a couple of months before you decide if you want to sell it or not."
He held out a brochure that had "Happy Trails" written in big letters across the top. There was a beautiful, bright, and vibrant photo on the front that looked more like a vacation spot than a campground. Adventure? I cocked a brow and looked back out the window at the camper. Yellow? I questioned the color on my home on wheels. I don't even like yellow.
"It's a pop-up. The top lifts to make more space. There's a kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, and you can drive it. It's perfect," he said with an upbeat tone. "Be sure you read the manual in the glove box on how to work all the equipment. It can be tricky."
Are you really trying to sell me on this camping idea? I lived in a 10,000-square-foot home with a house cleaner. I drive a Maserati. Drove. I gripped the keys of my little car in my hand. I looked down and opened my palm. Did drive a Maserati? I gulped back the tears and practically ripped the flamingo keychain out of his hand.
"I'm sorry to cut this short, but I've got to get to court."
He took his hand off my shoulder and put it in his pant pocket, pulling out a $100 bill.
"Here, this is for gas and food. I can feel the bones in your shoulder. Eat."
"No." I shook my head and stood up, a bit wobbly. "I'm fine. I don't need a handout." He didn't take no for an answer. He stuck the money in my palm and curled my fingers around it.
"Let me know when you get to Kentucky."
He smiled and patted my hand before he dropped it. His eyes softened.
"Mae, I'm sorry. Out of all my clients' wives, you've always been so kind and nice. I know this whole process has made you bitter and hard-hearted, but I know you're strong, and we'll figure this all out."
"Thanks, Stanley." I sucked in a deep breath. "You've been great. I know I sound like some spoiled brat, but I think I'm still in shock, having been in this nightmare for only 3 months.
I sent some of your things to the campground. There's even a storage facility on the grounds. The current manager knows you're coming. I put a file in the camper with her name on it and some information about the campsite."
He patted my back.
"I suggest you not even look at it until you get there, so you can focus on your new adventure the next couple of days."
"Couple of days? That's how long it'll take to drive to Kentucky?" I questioned, clearly not remembering how long it took the Greyhound to drive here years ago.
"In a camper? Yes." He walked over to the door and opened it. "Let me know if there's anything I can do for you."
"You've done enough, keeping me out of jail." I started to tear up, my voice cracked. "I can't thank you enough." I walked out the door, knowing that I'd never see Stanley again. The past few months, I'd seen him practically every day. When the FBI had shown up at our house that morning of the raid, I'd never forget. Stanley came right to the jail and bailed me out. We left Paul in there. He deserved it. It took a lot for Stanley to prove that I'd not signed any of the paperwork, and Paul had forged my name, but Stanley did it. I'm forever grateful. The long walk down the hall of his office was a blur. I was numb. I remember pushing open the door of his office building and stepping out into the bright sunshine. I pulled my sunglasses down on my nose and pushed them up. My eyes slid over to the cute little black convertible that was my birthday gift last year when I turned 30. Little did I realize it was bought with other people's money Paul had schemed them out of from our fake partnership. I slid my eyes over to the bright yellow camper and then down at the flamingo keychain. I guess it could be much worse, I grumbled and took my first steps toward my new reality as I tried to keep an upbeat attitude. 2. The day I drove out of my lawyer's parking lot and into the small southern town of Normal, I should have known then that nothing was going to be normal. Never, ever again was anything going to be normal. Before Paul, I was what you'd call a pretty normal person with a regular job as a flight attendant. I worked every shift at the airport I could and had a roof over my head. When I met Paul 5 years ago, I was 25. That's when I began to live his life with all of his lavish things. I'd gotten used to it pretty quickly, and the finer things just became part of my identity. Everyone thought I was a gold digger since Paul was a 61-year-old bachelor that had never been married. I wasn't. I truly fell in love with the Paul that I knew. I should have known something was wrong the night before the FBI showed up at our house. Paul had said something funny, like if something were to happen to him, he had me a special present in the sock drawer. I didn't know what that had meant. The FBI raided the house, and there was literally nothing in the sock drawer. But there was something in the secret sock drawer compartment that the FBI didn't find. It was $100,000 in cash, with a note from Paul that said the money was from my 401k that we'd cashed in. Little did I realize that he'd cashed it in to help fund his little crime. You can bet that I didn't turn that money in, though I probably should have. I convinced myself it was my 401k that he took from me. When it quickly dawned on me that my world was no longer in existence, I knew I had to make that money last. And this RV? What was I going to do with that? First off, I had no idea how to drive it. I didn't realize the toilet was just a hole that had to be cleaned out, which I can't believe there's not been an invention improving upon this. Regardless, I made it to Normal, Kentucky in a couple of days, like Stanley had predicted. I did what Stanley suggested and focused on getting to Kentucky while the other things worked their way out in my head. In fact, after taking a look at the brochure of the campground, I got a little excited. It was actually a little paradise, with a big fishing lake where there appeared to be a beach to lie out. I could stand to use a little color, and with summer fast approaching, this was exactly what I needed. Now, there was no denying that I was definitely going to sell it. But like Stanley said, while he found a buyer, I could just go check it out and see what I thought. From the photos, it was an upscale campsite. The latest craze for people in their 20s was to live with less and explore more, which could be a good thing for business. The brochure also showed a little tiki bar near a lake with a lot of people mingling around with smiles on their faces. It was a perfect place for me to go relax for a couple of months. Like Stanley said, it was easy income, with everyone paying me a lot fee each month. It appeared to be run like a well-oiled machine. The financial reports showed that there wasn't much money in the account, and only 2 employees, but it looked like I could cut back on a few things because the place looked perfect. I'm sure Dottie Swaggart, the property manager, was going to be very helpful in getting my feet wet. So many things rolled around in my head, and firing Dottie was one of them. But why would I do that when I was going to sell it anyways? It didn't appear that her salary was that much. I decided that any big decisions that needed to be made would be after I'd been there and taken in a few rays by the sparkling lake. This is way out here, I talked to myself after I'd driven out of town and into the country, hugging a few of the curvy roads that tickled my stomach. The entrance should be here somewhere. I leaned over the big steering wheel and looked out of the windshield. Happy Trails Campground. I read the faded words on a piece of propped-up wood that looked as if it had once arched over the entrance, like the one in the brochure. Pushing back the notions that this was a sign of what the campground looked like in person, I forged ahead, figuring they were in the process of having a brand new sign installed. If not, it'd be the first thing on my list. The folder Stanley had given me was in the middle console between me and the passenger seat. I grabbed it. I wrote down a list of to-dos, and repainting or buying a new sign was the first thing that would go on that list. And pavement, I murmured to myself as I wrote down a second to-do after the ticking sound of the gravel spitting up underneath the tires of the camper caught my attention. No one likes gravel. It was just a minor detail I wasn't going to let spoil my much-needed vacation in my fancy campground. At least Paul had done something right by me. The sun was shining, and the backdrop of the Daniel Boone National Park made up for an ugly sign. I couldn't wait to park this thing and plop down into a lawn chair next to the lake and let the bright sun warm my face. That'd make me feel a little better. I was sure of it. Pulling onto the grounds itself, I could see that there were plenty of trees for shade. There were storage units on the right, like Stanley had said. The brochure did say that campers who were here an extended time were able to rent those, which probably brought in more income for me. There was a small building in front of the storage units with peeling letters on the glass door that read, "Office." That just needs a little cleaning, I said, stopping the RV in front of it before I wrote that on the list. A little further down was a community recreation room, exactly like the brochure had said, though it needed a good coat of paint, or a bulldozing down. Either way, it too had to be a minor detail. A detail that I didn't think was so minor was the lush green Kentucky bluegrass that I'd read about and seen in the photos in the brochure that was in reality brown and burnt looking. Am I at the right place? I questioned, and picked up my phone to make sure the GPS had taken me to the right place. I guess so. I shrugged and wrote down that I might need to get some sod. Driving a little further and around what was supposed to be the lake and tiki bar, there were a cluster of run-down cabins. I brought the camper to an abrupt halt after I'd made the complete loop around the grounds. My jaw dropped. I picked up the brochure from the passenger seat and looked back and forth. No! I just couldn't believe my eyes. I shoved the gear shift into park. The entire Happy Trails campground was nothing like the brochure. The tiki bar consisted of 2 posts and a wood plank across them with a caved-in roof, not the plush and vibrant bar with stools and little lights and people smiling. I gulped. My eyes slid across the lake and the beach. Again, I referred back to the brochure. The glass blue lake with the people hanging out on the dock with their toes dipped in and a smile on their face, a fruity drink next to them, and lawn chairs along the beach was nowhere in sight. I was looking at a green film floating on top of a mucky brown piece of water with a small dock that had missing planks. There wasn't a single lawn chair on the dry dirt. I looked up and around. In the distance and off a couple of different roads, There were concrete pads with some grass between them. Some of the lots were filled with campers, and some were empty. According to the brochure, all the lots were filled with happy campers, twinkling lights, and smiling people. Where were my people? I gulped. Where were the crazy designed, twinkly lights people hung outside of their campers? My heart dropped into my gut. I should have known this wasn't going to pan out, and Paul screwed me again. Just as I was about to jerk the gear shift into drive and get out of Dodge, someone banged on the RV door. Knock, knock. My nerves were shot. I fumbled to unbuckle the seatbelt, hopped over the console into the living part of the camper, and pushed the door open. "What do you want?" The voice was hidden by a puff of smoke. "You almost gave me a heart attack on top of the one I'm currently having," I yelled, trying to see through the smoke. There was a fairly older woman standing about 5'9", with pink foam curlers clipped all over her red hair. Her green satin pajamas matched her fuzzy slippers. "I'm Dottie Swaggart. What'll I do you for?" she asked, and took a long, slow drag from the cigarette in her right hand, while her left hand rested on her jutted-out hip. "Is this Happy Trails campground?" I asked. The sun beat down on me when I stepped out of the camper. "Mm-hmm." She drew in a big breath. The coals at the end of her cig lit up bright red like her hair color as she sucked in. "One and only." She stared at me from behind a puff of smoke. "In Normal, Kentucky?" I fanned my hand in front of me so she didn't get her smoke in my face or my house on wheels. One and only." She chomped on a piece of gum and smoked at the same time. She put her fingers with her cig stuck between them up to her temple. She closed her eyes. "Let me think." She tapped her head. "You must be Mae West." Oh, gosh. My stomach knotted. My go-get-'em attitude was wavering. I reached over the back of the passenger seat and grabbed the brochure. "Where is this Happy Trails?" I shook the brochure at her. "Honey, you look as confused as a cow on AstroTurf," she cackled. "What?" I questioned. "What does a cow and AstroTurf have to do with anything?" "They are gonna eat you alive," she said in smug delight. "Paradise awaits." Dottie's lip cocked up on the right side as she smacked her gum and swept her hands out in front of her. "It's all yours." She turned around and laughed like a mad woman on her way to a small trailer that didn't have a way to drive. It looked like it was just plopped down, and the trailer hookup was casually resting on 2 cinder blocks. "Dottie, wait!" I hollered, kicking dust up under my feet as I chased her. "This isn't right. This isn't what the brochure shows." I let the part about being eaten alive just wash over me. Dottie Swaggart was someone I needed at this moment, and fussing with her wouldn't do me any good. "Honey, that brochure was printed well over 20 years ago when it was booming around here. The national park is still going strong, and when tourists come to town, they take one look at Happy Trails and hightail it on out of Normal, finding a campground in another town." She dropped her cigarette on the ground and used the toe of her shoe to snuff it out. She turned back around, walking to the camper. "Where's the Kentucky bluegrass? We are in Kentucky." I looked around with the brochure in my grips and hurried towards her. When I was a kid growing up in Kentucky, I never paid attention to the grass. I just wanted to get out of there. "Shouldn't there be the famous bluegrass?" "What we got here is fine Kentucky dirt." She bent down and picked up a handful of the driest soil. "We like to sprinkle it around like fairy dust and make wishes." She threw it in the air, letting out a big cackle. "You're teasing me, right?" I wasn't sure how to take Dottie. "You are a city girl," she said to herself like she was confirming her immediate perception of me. She continued in a fast-paced walk towards her camper. "We can fix it back up in a couple of weeks." I waved the brochure in the air, running after her, feeling somewhat helpless.
"Listen here, Mae West."
She turned to face me, stopping shy of her metal door.
"You don't look like Mae West from the Wild West."
Mae is a family name, and West is my married name. If I had $1 for everyone who'd said that to me in the last few years, I'd not be standing in a run-down campground hoping to make a living, which was obviously on hold.
"May I call you Mae?"
she asked. I nodded.
"There's a lot more things around here to fix than making it all prettied up like that there brochure."
She grabbed it from me and flipped it over, pointing out the copyright date from decades before.
"We need to fix the washers and dryers, vending machine, clean up the lake, and did you see the dock?"
"I have all the financial statements." I bit my lip, my brows furrowed. "All the reports show that the campground is doing good." That obviously wasn't the case.
"Mae, I figure you to be a smart girl. After what happened to you, I think you'd know that sometimes things that are on paper aren't as they really appear."
She was talking about Paul and his scheme.
"Here."
She pulled a set of keys out of her pocket.
"She's all yours. I've been dying to get out of this place. Plus, you had some things shipped here. I put them in the storage building over there. Number 4.
"What are these?" My heart beat rapidly and my palms sweat. "Dottie?" She patted her dirty old camper.
"Them there are the keys to all the locks on the outbuilding and the storage units."
She gestured to them.
"That sweet husband of yours didn't pay me the last couple of years. He said that I could live in this junker for free. I'm happy to give you the keys and make you in charge."
She opened the door.
"I'll only be a second to grab my underwear, and you can move right on in."
She reopened the door and went inside. "Wait, no, that's not what I mean." My mouth dried because all my saliva had apparently flooded my eyes. "I can't do this anymore. I hate you, Paul West." I dropped to the ground, not worried if I'd fallen into one of Dottie's cigarettes or whatever else was on the dirt ground. But I'd had enough. I was broken, and nothing was going to fix me. I buried my head in my hands and sobbed.
"Did you say you hate Paul West?"
She popped her head out the door. "Yes, I hate him. I hate this place," I sobbed.
"Well, you just might fit right on in here after all. We all hate Paul West around here."
Dottie held the door open and waved me in.
"You know he's a liar."
"Oh, I'm aware. Look at me." I pointed to my curls that had gotten worse since I stepped out of the RV. The humidity wasn't doing me any favors. "I'm so overdue for a highlight. And look at my nails." I wiggled them in front of my face and showed her the chipped-up mess that was at least 2 weeks overdue.
"I've got someone that can fix you right up."
She picked up a strand of my hair.
"This is the least of your problems. Coffee?"
"Yes, that'd be great." I nodded. The door slammed shut, making me jump.
"Get on in here."
She held the camper screen door open. "Do you live here?" I asked, and looked around as I took a seat at one of the kitchen chairs. The inside was what I'd expected to see. Fun pineapple party lights strung up all over the back of the couch, along the back wall. The kitchen flowed from there. She had a small cafe table and the 2 chairs right across from the kitchenette, where she was filling up 2 white coffee cups. She sat a cup in front of me.
"Creamer? Sugar?"
she asked. "No, this is good." I brought the cup up to my mouth and took a sip, feeling an instant relief. "I really like your camper."
"There's more to Dottie than meets the eye."
She referred to herself in third person and made me smile.
"Looky there, you're smiling. Now, if you put on some lipstick, you'd be downright pretty, and find you a man to take care of you and your problems here, Mae West." She fiddled in one of the cabinets, snapped a paper towel off the roll, and put the fingernail polish remover on the table. "That's the last thing I need." I took another sip. "I've got to figure out how to get this place looking presentable, because my lawyer is looking for a buyer. No one in their right mind is going to buy this dump." "No one in their right minds parks their RV in this dump." She read my mind. "Cheers." We knocked cups and laughed. We talked while I took the chipped polish off my nails. "Well, we got Henry down the road. He's down yonder in the fifth wheel camper, and he's the handyman. Literally, he only maintains what we've got here. I've tried to get a hold of your husband, but he'd never return our calls. I'd gotten a lawyer if we had money, but we don't got nothing but a roof over our heads." She got up from the chair and grabbed the carafe, refilling our mugs. "I'm all ears if you've got ideas, but I guess you're gonna make me pay rent now that you're here." "No," I shook my head. "I need you, Dottie Swaggart, and I'm new to all this. I need you, Dottie," I said again so I could get my point across. There was no reason to even bring up my past life. That was far behind me now. So was Paul West. I was going to just keep my chin up and get this place cleaned up, even if I had to do it myself. I looked down at the brochure I'd put down on the kitchen table. If it was the last thing I ever did on this earth, and it killed me, I was going to make this place look just like the brochure, and I had a few weeks to do it. I needed all the help I could get. "Just what are you thinking?" She eyeballed me. "You said something about a national park. Tell me about it." I knew that families were big on traveling in campers during the warmer months. "Mae West, you're smack dab in the middle of the Daniel Boone National State Park. We've got 2 big lakes in this park, along with lots of biking, hiking, camping, horseback riding, and zip lining," she boasted. "In the day, Happy Trails was booked for months and even had a waiting list. Then one thing broke after the other, and Paul West never fixed it." "You're telling me that Daniel Boone National State Park is something people come to see?" I asked. She nodded. "And that this is seasonal?" "The state park is open all year around. Normal is a charming city that visitors love to come and check out the little shops, but not so much Happy Trails." "Dottie, me and you are going to change that." I brought the cup up to my lips and stared through the steam as the wheels in my head started to turn and the dollars in profit started to add up. I might be able to sell this thing quicker than I'd anticipated once I got it cleaned up and tourists back in here. 3. If only Happy Trails was as charming as the town of Normal itself, I'd be in the selling business. There were parallel roads going down Main Street, one way each. In the middle of the 2 lanes was a median with a combination of grass and stepping stones. There were picnic tables among the large oak trees on each side of an amphitheater and covered seating area. Thick white pillars you'd see on the front porch of a plantation home held up the structure. Each post had a real gas lantern hanging off them. Large ferns toppled over several ceramic planters. There were twinkling lights around each pole, giving it such a romantic feel. There were little shops that ran along each side of Main Street. They ranged from the Smelly Dog, which was a pet groomer, Normal Diner, as well as the Tough Nickel Thrift Shop and Dieter's Feed and Seed, along with more boutique-type shops that I couldn't wait to check out. The display windows of each shop even had visions of family camping and summers in Normal. The shops were freestanding cottage-style homes with a small courtyard between them. The sidewalk was filled with people milling around,
which means that there were people in the town and possibly customers for the campground. My mind was swirling with marketing ideas I had no idea I'd had. Downtown Normal seemed to cater to campers. I pulled the RV into a parking lot that was clearly marked for campers. Dottie Swaggart had told me there was a laundromat in town after I'd asked her where the residents of the campground did their laundry, since I had a few pieces of clothing that needed to be cleaned. Stanley had mentioned he sent my boxes of things to the campground, and those were filled with my clothes. Those were clothes that I probably wouldn't be wearing in Normal, so I picked up a few t-shirts at the rest stops along the way, and those were in desperate need of cleaning. When Dottie told me the washers and dryers at the campground were all broken, I ended up moving the sign down to number 3 on the to-do list and moving the repairs to the laundry machines up to number 1. The Laundry Club laundromat was a short walk from the parking lot, which was a smart business plan. It allowed campers to park and do some washing. I pushed the door open of the laundromat and flung the pillowcase full of the clothes I'd salvaged on my own, plus the teas I'd picked up along the way, over my shoulder. "That one in the far right corner in the back is the best ones." There was a woman sitting at a card table right as you walked into the door. Her short blonde hair was held back with a headband that matched her hot pink bodysuit, purple leg warmers, and bright white shoes. She tapped the glass globe on one of those plasma spheres that looked like electricity was running to your finger that was so popular a few years ago. She had a lazy laughter in her eyes. Her dark eyes circled around my body. "Thanks," I muttered and headed into the direction of her pointing. "Don't pay Queenie much attention. She lied." Another woman stood up from a leather chair, which I found sort of odd in a laundromat. She held a book in her hand. She appeared to be in her late 20s, if I had to guess. She had her brown hair pulled up into a ponytail. "I'm Abby Fawn, Normal County Public Library librarian and part-time Tupperware sales associate." "I'm Mae West." I stuck my hand out. "It's nice to meet you." "Mae West, huh?" She reached into her back pocket and pulled out her phone. She said as she typed, "Hashtag Mae West is in hashtag Normal Kentucky. Is this hashtag normal?" "What are you doing?" I tried to see over the top of her phone to see what she was typing. Was she one of those people who was going to inform the news that I was now in Normal? They'd been trying to score an interview with me since the FBI raid. "I used social media to get the word out about things happening in Normal since tourism has been down. You don't hear about Mae West coming around here much." There was some sarcasm in her voice. Queenie let out a fit of laughter. "Mae West, I'm Queenie French. Nice to meet your acquaintance." My hand was still stuck out in front of me to shake Abby's hand. As if in slow motion, Abby took a step into my personal space, and her arms began to open really wide, curling them around me and pulling me towards her in a bear hug. My face flattened against her shoulder, my arms plastered to my side. "Honey, we don't shake here. We hug." She squeezed extra hard. "That means you hug me back?" I lifted one arm and patted her on the back. "2 arms," she instructed me. "We do real 2-armed hugs." I lifted my other arm. "Now squeeze," she insisted. "Tighter." I pushed my arms together a tiny bit more. "Tighter." "Leave her alone." Dottie Swaggart walked into the laundry club, this time with a pair of short khakis, white shirt tucked tight, a pair of flip-flops, and her bright red hair curled all around her head. "This here's Mae West, and she's one of us now. I'm glad you found the place." Our eyes caught each other's, and after a couple of seconds, our eyes softened as we both gave each other a gentle smile. "Why didn't you say you was one of us?" Queenie jumped up and hurried over to a table in the back corner of the laundromat. "This calls for a round of coffee." "You go on and use those laundry machines on the side wall." Abby pointed the way. "They are pretty fast, and I'm sure you don't want to hang around the club too long." She winked. "You better get used to it, because the laundry club is the closest thing you're going to get to a country club in Normal." Queenie walked back over with a tray of styrofoam cups filled to the rim with coffee and a couple of cookies. "We have fresh coffee every day, a TV, and a monthly book club meeting. If you need to just chit-chat, you can come on by, and someone is always here." "I've never been to a laundromat, and it's really nice." I looked around and noticed a bookshelf with books. There was a poster hanging over the top of it that mentioned a book club meeting. "There really is a book club?" I asked. Not that I'd ever been in one, but I better get to know these ladies if I was going to get Happy Trails up and running. They might be some sort of help. "Yes. Do you like to read?" Abby asked with wide eyes. "Mm-hmm," I agreed. It was easier, though I'd not picked up a book in years. "Great! I bring the really torn-up books from the library here instead of us throwing them out." She smiled. "Every time someone wants to throw away a book, a little bit of my soul dies." "We duct tape them because we don't want Abby's soul to die." Queenie went back over to her table and sat down. "Nothing duct tape can't fix." She grabbed a bag off the floor and dragged it onto her lap, pulling out a big roll of duct tape. "Can it fix a campground?" I half joked and half serious. "You're the new owner. I thought I recognized that name, West." Abby snapped her finger and looked over at Dottie for confirmation. "Welcome to Normal. I didn't think you looked like you were from around these parts." She scrunched up her nose and brought her cup of coffee up to take a drink. There was an awkward silence between me and the three women. They were all staring at me like it was show and tell, and it was my turn. I bent down and grabbed a handful of clothes, throwing them into the washer. I shut the door and looked at the keypad. There were so many choices, so I just picked the top one. "I can see it!" Queenie gasped. Her hands flew up and over her head. They formed a claw before they swooped down and touched the glass ball. The electricity roared toward the touch of her fingers. "You are a rich girl who has fallen on hard times. You've had someone to take care of you for a long time." She threw her head back and sucked in a deep, dramatic breath, sending her head forward. She lifted her hands and dropped them back on the ball. "I predict your future is bleak, poorer than you've ever been." I looked at Queenie. Was she some sort of weirdo psychic? "Didn't you tell Mae not to pay attention to her?" Dottie rushed over to the table and jerked out the cord that ran from Queenie's ball to the electrical outlet. "I did." Abby glared at Queenie. "What?" Queenie shrugged. "First off, she didn't separate out her clothes between darks and whites. She mixed linens with cotton. Then she didn't put detergent in. She pushed the first button she saw." Queenie crossed her arms in a huff. "So, you can't read my mind or any of that other voodoo stuff?" I questioned, being let down a little bit because I was going to ask her how long it was going to take to sell the campground. "Heck no." Abby rolled her eyes. "She likes to pretend to, but look at her. She's a 60-year-old widowed jazzercise instructor that spends every waking moment here at the laundry club when she's not doing jazz hands or jazz square or whatever other jazz they're doing in the undercroft of the Normal Baptist Church." "Free coffee and TV," Queenie smiled. "You can't beat it." She eased herself up out of her chair. "Now, you look like you need a mama to take care of you while you're here." I looked up at the TV, and there was Paul's big mug shot on one of those news programs. I turned away. There was no sense in looking at it. The media loved plastering his face on a daily basis when there wasn't any more news to tell. Queenie hit another button on the washing machine and opened the door. Abby had walked over a basket on wheels. Dottie started to take out my wet clothes. "What do you mean, while I'm here?" I asked, while I watched them closely, so I wouldn't have to ask anyone again if I had to come back. But I was hoping to get the machines at the park fixed. Was I that transparent? "From what Dottie told us," Queenie started.
"I didn't tell them nothing,"
Dottie snarled.
"Why, you liar. You big liar. You called us up as soon as she pulled into her lot at the Happy Trails."
Queenie shook a finger at Dottie. Dottie's face reddened.
"Anyways, she said that you had some sort of brochure and something about fixing up the place to sell."
"Like you're better than us." Abby offered a kind smile when I didn't deserve it. "We understand. We don't get many people that actually move to Normal. Soon we probably won't even be a town."
"I did hear that business was down in the shops."
Queenie nodded.
"Poor Daniel Boone is probably rolling over in his grave."
I stuttered for words, actually embarrassed by my actions.
"Don't you worry that little head of yours."
Abby rolled her eyes.
"Daniel Boone isn't rolling over in his grave. He died before they named all the wooded land after him."
"I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression. It's just that the past few months of my life haven't been the greatest for me, and I'm not sure how to maneuver this new life of mine."
"Don't you worry. We're all here for you no matter what you decide."
Abby gave another wink.
"Let me show you how to do laundry."
Queenie pulled a couple of quarters out of her fanny pack. I stood there and watched as she fed the machine the quarters, then pushed all sorts of buttons, while Dottie brought over detergent. I can't say that I heard every word. All I could hear was the sound of my heart beating to the tune of joy. It was something I'd not felt in a long time.
"Let's talk about Happy Trails."
Dottie had a puzzle piece in her hand and was leaned over the table where there were the beginnings of a puzzle. She patted a chair next to her.
"Bring your coffee over here."
Abby put her book down and walked over. Not long after that, Queenie came over. Before I knew it, we all had a puzzle piece in our hand, trying to fit them together.
"Get to the nitty-gritty."
Queenie was a spitfire. I could only imagine what her jazzercise class looked like.
"What do you plan to do with the Happy Trails?"
"I'm not sure how much you know about my ex-husband, Paul." I tried to fit the puzzle piece a couple of times in 2 different spots, but my hands were shaky, so I just put it back on the table with the other loose pieces and decided to just enjoy the coffee. He did a lot of people wrong, and that included me.
"We watched it all right here on that TV."
Abby nodded.
"If I remember, they were trying to pin it on you, too."
"Right, but he forged my signature on a lot of the documents, and that was proven by a handwriting analysis." I took a drink of coffee. I wasn't sure why I was opening up to these women. I'd not even opened up to my own family. Not that I've talked to them in years, but still, these women were complete strangers. Maybe that was why. They didn't know anything about me, and my real story could come out, not what was in the tabloids and news.
"Go on."
Queenie patted a piece in place and grabbed another one. "We'd been married a couple of years. I'm 30 and he's 61. I looked to see their reaction. All of their heads jerked up, and they looked at each other.
"You're a gold digger?"
Queenie was apparently the type of person who just said what she wanted. "No, I actually fell in love with him. He has that silver hair, which I think is really foxy. The memories of how we met flooded my mind. He was a successful and single businessman. I was a flight attendant. He hired me to be his personal attendant on his plane. He didn't have children, and I actually signed a prenuptial agreement."
"That was ignorant for such a smart girl." "Well,"
Queenie's eyes drew up and down me.
"You look smart anyways. They say looks can be deceiving." "Queenie!"
Abby and Dottie scolded her.
"What?"
Queenie's lip curled up in the corner.
"I call it as I see it."
I loved him. He was really kind, giving, and he took great care of me.
Then one day the FBI showed up. I had no idea what was going on. My throat suddenly dried, and I drank the rest of my coffee. He did a lot of people wrong. Left me bankrupt, homeless, and embarrassed.
You got the happy trails, Dottie said as if it were a prize.
A couple of days ago, I traded in my house and car keys for the camper. Our lawyer said that it'd be a new start for me. I'm not going to lie. The brochure he gave me made it look like paradise, and I figured I'd take a little vacation here while I got my head screwed on right, and then sell it. I laughed through my nose. I'm not a landlord, and don't even know how to do it. Someone else would be much better than me, especially now that I've seen it. I feel awful these people are living this way, and I've just got to do something about it.
Like what? Abby asked.
I don't know. I swallowed hard, trying to manage a feeble answer. Something like a fundraiser? We could clean up the lake, and maybe get some of the shops to donate some things, since it'll help benefit everyone in Normal. I thought of the flamingo keychain. Something with flamingos and palm trees.
We could go to the party supply store. Queenie nodded. The Happy Trails really just needs a quick cleanup, and I can make everyone clean the outsides of the campers.
Dottie made a good point.
When they're cleaned, it's all shiny. And we can all make something, or get Bets Hager and the Bible Thumpers to donate food and stuff.
Queenie's voice rose an octave. Bible Thumpers? I asked.
Don't listen to Queenie. How many times do I have to tell you that?
Abby joked.
Bets Hager is the owner of the laundry club, and she's usually here, but today is her weekly Bible club meeting. She's one of us. Actually, Bets does a lot of things around Normal.
I remembered Paul used to tell me how he made sure when he first started out in business that he rubbed elbows with the community's major players. In the end, he was a crook, but it did make sense to figure out who knew everything in Normal, so I could get the fixes on the park, sell it, and get on with my new life. Not that I had something against Normal, Kentucky. It just wasn't my home, or even my life.
She carries a Bible and might hit you with it. But yeah, she's one of us.
Dottie followed up.
It's the four of us together all the time. Her husband is the Normal Baptist Church preacher, and she's in a group of women who love to cook and participate in anything.
Beep, beep. The rattle of an old-school bus slowly passed by the laundry club. A young woman was hanging out one of the small slide-down windows, flailing her arms.
Speak of the Bible Thumpers,
Queenie said under her breath with a smile on her face and waving back.
They travel in a bus? I asked.
In packs. Queenie winked and nudged Dottie.
Queenie, you're going to scare Mae off, and we don't need that, Dottie warned her. Bets has to do all that church stuff. Today's the day they go witness to that cushy penitentiary in Lexington.
Cushy? Without saying anything, I knew that was where Paul had been taken for his sentence.
Yeah,
Queenie's nose curled.
It's a fancy one, like the one Martha Stewart was in. The criminals there didn't kill anyone. They just broke the law. She shrugged. Bets and her church friends go to minister to the men in prison each week. They even take some baked goods.
Dottie smiled.
You know, goodwill and all that stuff. That's why the Bible Thumpers will be perfect to bake the desserts for the fundraiser. Goodwill and stuff.
Queenie nodded a few times.
So, we've got the sweets covered. We can get everyone in the campground to cook some sort of camping food, like we do once a week.
She nodded towards Dottie, who nodded back. Apparently they knew what each other was talking about.
Dottie is going to get the residents of the campground to clean up a little. Abby will go to the supply store and do all that social media hashtag thingy, she continued.
What am I going to do? I looked between them to see if they had any sage advice before I got in front of Bats.
You're going to come up with a business plan on how you can get happy trails looking like that brochure. Research how much sod costs and getting the lake cleaned up."
"The laundry machines fixed?" I nodded, but they all frowned.
"Nah, we got the laundry club," they tisked, and we all broke out in laughter.
Hashtag Happy Trails Campground in the hashtag Daniel Boone National Park in hashtag Normal Kentucky will be ready for the hashtag summer season in a couple of weeks. Hashtag New Campground. Hashtag Beach Party. Hashtag Party, Abby said as she typed. Hashtag Grand Reopening.
I couldn't help but give a nervous laugh, because this was going to go down. 4. On my way back from the laundromat, I was finding myself humming some songs and tapping my finger on the wheel of the camper. I didn't know what it was, but those 3 women made me feel better about my circumstances than I'd felt in a long time. Quickly, that feeling fell back into despair when I turned back into the campground, and the reality of work to get the campground looking like the brochure was laid out right in front of me. I drove my camper into the spot Dottie had assigned me to, though I should get what spot I wanted. Regardless, I was living my worst nightmare, and how on earth was I going to pull off a fundraiser and make good on the things that I made sound so amazing? The thought of a nap sounded good, and falling asleep to the TV sounded better. The TV was hidden behind a little panel next to the kitchen on the wall. I pushed the panel door back and pulled the kitchen table out from the wall. I was too tired to move and pull anything else out of the walls, so I just sat down on the bench and laid my head down with my arm extended out while I held the remote and pushed the button. Nothing happened. I sat up and pushed the on button harder. Nothing. I got up and looked at the TV. It was plugged in, but not working. Go figure. I sighed and looked out the kitchen window. The sun beating down on the lake made the lake look even dirtier. "I better go look at the lake," I muttered, giving up on a nap, and threw the TV remote control on the table, and resigning to the fact that I was never going to watch TV again. There was a note that was taped to the outside of the door. "Fix the dew in the vending machine," was scribbled on a piece of paper. I crumbled it up and threw it inside the camper. Careful not to step in anything, I kept my eyes to the ground as I walked over to the lake. No doubt that it was pretty nice in its heyday, and I'd longed to have seen it, because it was turning out to be a beautiful day. Laying on a beach with the sun beating down on me was something I needed. I walked around the lake and was delighted in the small patches of grass that were popping up. There was a little hope for that lush Kentucky bluegrass, even though the patches did resemble a thistle bush. I wasn't going to let that dash my hopes, and walked over to the wooden dock. There was no sugar-coating it. The dock had more buckled boards than flat ones. Rusted nails popped out of almost every single board. With each step closer to the edge, the more it creaked under my feet. There was a man walking around the dirt and looking down. "Welcome to normal," he chuckled in a country accent that I wouldn't even classify as Southern. He wore one-piece blue zip-up overalls and was stabbing a piece of paper with one of those trash picker-uppers. Not that I'd know what it was called, but his laughter made me wonder if he was laughing at me, standing there on the rickety wooden dock with my fingers pinching my nose. The ends of straggly hair made a perfect skirt around his head from underneath his filthy baseball cap. "This isn't normal," I groaned, careful not to open my mouth, in fear some sort of airborne funk was going to seep into my lungs, and then to be sick in this godforsaken place would just be the cherry on top of what was turning out to be a really crummy life. "I guess you're Henry." "The one and only." He tee-heed and put the tip of the poker in the garbage bag. "I'm thinking you're Mae West." He walked closer and was a little scragglier than he appeared from a distance. He had a big nose and wide smile that exposed the missing 2 top front teeth. "The one and only." I put my hand out and shook his. It was becoming obvious that Dottie Swaggart had called everyone she knew after I met her this morning, and Normal was gossipier than I figured. "It looks like we've got us a mess here, Henry." I looked out over the lake. I pointed to the broken wooden sign that said the pond was catch and release. "I'm thinking I might catch an illness if I tried to fish in there," I joked.
"Ain't been a fish in that water for a long time. This lake's been as useful as buttons on a dish rag."
His country accent came back in spades. He stood next to me and tapped the toe of his worn-out brown boot on one of the popped-up wooden boards that was one of many that needed to be hammered down or just replaced. But where was I going to get that money? "Shocker," I muttered in a sarcastic tone and looked out over the green sludge layer. "Do you know when you're going to be able to take a look at the laundry room?"
"Oh, I've looked at them plenty of times. It's the parts that I keep looking at that don't come for free," he said. "I'm not sure if Dottie told you, but there's barely enough in the budget to keep the vending machine and Mountain Dew."
"And that seems to be a priority around here." I rolled my eyes, wondering if he was the one who taped the note to my door. "I'd like to see if we can get bottled water in there, too." It was such a simple suggestion that I knew was going to meet with some hesitation.
"Around here, we don't like to pay for bottled water when we can just turn on the tap and get it from there," he shrugged. "Not having bottled water is what I call rich people's problems. And between you and me, we ain't got those issues."
I pinched a smile and bit my tongue, looking over the lake and wondering if that was the tap water they were drinking. The sound of tires spitting up gravel underneath them caught our attention, and both of us turned at the same time, which didn't turn out to be a good idea. "Henry!" I screamed as if he were going to be able to help me, but he was too busy trying to save himself from the crumbling dock. With a big splash, both of us were waist-deep in the musky green water, drenched.
"I guess I can fix the dock."
Henry wiped away something unrecognizable from his eyes. "Why?" I screamed at the top of my lungs and started to cry as I looked up to the sky. I'd not even noticed the black car had stopped right in front of us, and there were 2 men standing in front of us, on dry land, in blue suits and sunglasses. One was taller than the other. "Help us," I instructed them with my hand stuck out in front of me. "Now," I insisted. It took the men to find their footing before they seemed comfortable that they weren't going to fall into the death lake to get us out.
"Mae West."
The one who pulled me out took his glasses off, exposing the most beautiful green eyes. It caught me off guard because I'd never seen a black-haired man with sparkling green eyes. I wiped down my shirt and tried to push my hair back into place, but whatever was in that lake was like plaster and taped every single strand of my hair on my face. "Do I know you?" I asked, and decided to just go with a smile in hopes it was much prettier than my current appearance.
"I'm Detective Hank Sharp with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and when I'm not doing that, I'm a park ranger."
He pulled his fancy suit coat open and pulled out a badge.
"This is my partner, Detective Elmo Burke."
Mr. Burke didn't appear to have the physique Detective Sharp had. He was shorter, with small round glasses and bald on top, but had hair on the side. He reminded me of George from Seinfeld. "It was very nice of you to stop by and introduce yourself, but as you can see," out of the corner of my eye, I could see Henry's face, his jaw all flapped open. "We are a little busy, right, Henry?" He snapped his mouth shut. "Detective Hank," I started to say, and put my hand out to thank him for dropping by.
"Detective Sharp,"
he corrected me. I lowered my eyes when I saw it wasn't in goodwill that he was stopping by. I'm guessing you're not with the welcoming committee. I'm not sure what you want with me. If this has to do with my ex-husband, you can call— I was rudely interrupted by Detective Hank again. I'm very aware that you had nothing to do with his Ponzi scheme, but I'm not so sure you didn't have anything to do with his escape. He pulled his sunglasses off his face so smooth that he looked like one of those cute TV cops. Escape? I gulped, and now wished I'd paid attention to the news report I'd seen on the TV at the laundry club. We figured he'd come here to see you, since he never really wanted to sign the divorce papers. And from what your lawyer told us, this piece of property is in your name. That's why we think he's here. Detective Hank stared, while the other guy started to walk around. Have you seen him? Suddenly, I got nervous. Was he trying to read my body language, like I'd seen done in movies? I began to pick at the stray limbs and other unrecognizable things that clung to my plastered head of hair. Trust me, I put my hand on my hip after I realized I looked nervous. I'd done killed the jerk if he showed up here. Hank? Detective Burke jutted his chin in the air, gesturing Detective Hank over. You stay there, Ms. West, he instructed me. Listen, this is my campground, and if there's something to see, I'm going to see it. I stomped on my way over before he could stop me. Is that a foot? Henry asked over my shoulder. Foot? I let out a nervous laugh. No. I leaned a little closer, and it sure looked like something that could be a foot. But nah. It's part of the broken dock. I nodded, completely convincing myself. I might not be real educated, but I'm thinking it's a foot that's attached to a leg. Henry curled his nose, and then his brows rose as the leg floated to the top of the lake and was attached to a body. Definitely a foot and a leg. His nose curled. Ah! I screamed and jumped when the head of the body popped up like one of those red button things on a pressure cooker that let you know when it was finished cooking. Paul! I gasped, bringing my hand up to my mouth. 5. You didn't know he was here. Detective Hank Sharp's eye drew down on my face as I sat in the chair at my tiny kitchen table. Out of the window over the sink, I could see the sheriff's car, along with a couple more of those black cars, and what I guessed was the county coroner, who'd I'd yet had the pleasure of meeting. I told you before he floated to the top that I didn't even know he'd escaped. I haven't watched TV because it's broke, and I don't read the paper. I couldn't believe it. Someone had gotten to Paul before me. I'll be darned. I couldn't help but wonder which client of his got him. Has he called you? Detective Hank flipped the light switch on and off a couple of times. No, I don't know what's wrong with this thing. It just stopped working. I laid my head on the table and just decided to give up. Maybe jail was better than this. I was hungry, tired, and broke. At least in jail there was TV, food, and a bed. Do you have the battery plugged in? Hank asked. Battery? I questioned his RV skills. It's got plenty of gas. I'm not talking about driving. I'm talking about all the other stuff. He flipped his notebook closed and put it back in his jacket pocket. Other stuff? I should have read the manual like Stanley told me. Oh no, I gulped. Stanley was serious about an owner's manual in the glove box. I thought he was joking. Who's Stanley? Hank asked. My lawyer. Paul's lawyer. My head tittered back and forth. I can't afford Stanley anymore. My face jerked up. Oh no, am I going to need a lawyer? Did you kill Paul West? He asked. No, I gasped.
Somebody got to him first, I mumbled.
Those are things you don't say to me.
Hank rubbed his hands together.
Okay, where are your plugs?
Plugs? He was talking some different language that I didn't understand.
Did you say the owner's manual is in the glove box?
He asked. I nodded. He pointed towards the front of the camper.
Can I get it?
Sure, I have nothing to hide. I shrugged and wondered what my first meal in jail was going to be, because there was nothing here to eat, and the cash I'd found in Paul's sock drawer was dwindling fast. The RV was a gas guzzler, and I didn't figure that into the grand scheme of my plan to take a vacation at Happy Trails and sell the thing. Boy, so much had changed in the last 24 hours, including Paul showing up dead. Did you find it? I found the strength to get up and walk out of the RV, where I found Hank plugging in the camper. I had no idea. Hank looked at me. There it was, that look where people realized who I was and what I'd gone through, the sympathy look. If you show me, I'm a quick learner. I wasn't going to let this guy think I was an idiot. I had brains, and I was pretty smart, too. Being a kept woman gave people the impression I was ditzy. Granted, my husband embezzled millions of dollars and hurt a lot of people, but it wasn't like I was doing his business. He got up every morning, got ready for work, went to work, and came home at a decent hour. There was nothing out of the ordinary from how he'd always been. Maybe our trips got a little more extravagant, but nothing that'd make it so noticeable. Still, I had a brain.
Every time you go to a campground or stop, you should plug in, so you have electricity. I'm assuming the toilet is also on the outlet.
Hank pointed to the different plugs. Then he went into how many volts the RV had, and how it had 2 electrical systems that fed different things like water heater, furnace, and refrigerator, plus most of the lights in the RV's living space, water pump, your carbon monoxide detector, and the kitchen appliances. It was truly a house on wheels, and everything, like a house, needed electric.
That's why the campers pay a lot fee.
He smiled and showed off some really pretty teeth.
As the owner or manager, you're responsible for paying the electric bills, along with any other utilities.
I remembered seeing something about that in the files Stanley had given me. Thanks, I said sincerely. You're the first person who showed me this.
If you're not used to living in an RV, then you don't know.
He pointed down the campground.
I own that blue one over there. I don't live here full time, but my grandpa did, and there's so many memories from fishing and camping here that I couldn't get rid of it after the place started going downhill.
Oh. I let out a big sigh and thought I should probably get some sort of RV reference book from the library. Want to come in for a drink while I answer your questions? The neglect Paul had done at the campground really did extend generations, and not just the present people here.
I'm working, he reminded me, but I'll take a coffee if you've got it.
I have a Keurig, I nodded. I don't really know how to use it, but I can figure it.
I'll show you.
He gestured for me to walk in front of him. My brows furrowed.
A Southern gentleman lets the lady go first.
Even a lady that you think killed her con ex-husband? I joked and warmed inside with the Southern manner thing. It was only something I'd heard about, but never really experienced. I thought it was just a bunch of talk, but it was real, with Hank anyways. Once inside, he showed me how to use the Keurig, which I'd not been able to figure out on my own, and we sat at the table. I'll start from the beginning. I took the first Keurig and gave it to him with a quarter pitcher of milk from the mini-fridge that was curdled. He shoved it away. Electrical thing. I opened the trash and threw it in. While my coffee was being made, I started to tell him about my relationship with Paul from the beginning and where we were today.
You had no idea.
He asked a question I'd been asked 1,000,000 times.
Everyone asks me that. There wasn't anything that pointed to it. Nothing was out of order. No big presents. Our lifestyle stayed the same. 1 trip a year, out with friends weekly. I went to different committees and took tennis lessons. Hearing the words come out of my mouth almost made me sick at how privileged I'd become. I hung my head and circled the top of the coffee mug with my finger. I'm ashamed of how that all sounds. I'm smarter than that, and really should have looked at the finances.
The last time you spoke to him?
He asked. I went to jail to see him after it happened because I was so shocked, and I honestly thought they had the wrong guy. There was no way he'd done that. He was so giving. My jaw dropped. He gave a lot of money to charities and friends.
That's probably where he'd funneled a lot of the money, but that's not my department. I'm sticking with how he got out of prison, and now dead in your campground. Plus, you said that you'd kill him if he did show up. He did show up. Dead.
Hank didn't have to tell me things I already knew. I didn't kill him. I didn't even know that he'd escaped, I reminded him.
We came here because we figured he'd show up here first, since you were here.
He took that notebook back out of his pocket. Apparently, someone else did too. I sucked in a deep breath and looked out the window as the coroner's car pulled off from where Paul had floated up.
Which brings me to my next question.
Hank put his pen to the paper.
Do you have any clue who would have killed him?
Is this a joke question? Because I can think of a lot of people who'd love to get their hands around his neck. I leaned my arms on the table.
I have a long list of the people he ripped off.
He took another piece of paper out of his jacket.
They were actually on my list to go and see if Paul tried to contact them, but that's when I thought he was an escaped convict.
He put the paper on the table and used his hands to straighten out the wrinkles best he could.
Do you recognize any names that he might have talked about, or really just any memory of any of them?
I took my time and read each name carefully. Grady Cox. I pointed to his name. Grady was a friend of Paul's. I had no idea he and Ava had been one of his victims. My voice dropped a volume. I remember him saying they were horse people. I left the part out that Paul had also mentioned that the Coxes were full of money.
Believe it or not, most of his victims were everyday people, like me and the campers here. Did you know that Henry Bryan was a client?
He flipped the paper around and scanned down it until he found Henry's name and pointed to it. Henry Bryan? I wasn't familiar with the name.
Henry, your handyman?
He turned his head towards the kitchen window. I didn't know his last name. How much did he give Paul? I gulped, knowing that by the appearance, Henry didn't look like he had much.
He had $2,000 in his savings. When he contacted Paul about some repairs, Paul showed up here.
Hank flipped through the notebook.
Everyone here was pretty excited because they thought Paul was taking it seriously.
How long ago was this? I didn't remember Paul making a trip to Kentucky.
3 months ago. Paul was desperate for more cash, and he took anything he could get his hands on, including Henry's savings.
Hank's story hurt me, not about Paul coming here, but how he saw Henry as money and not the sweet man that he'd appeared to be. Do you think Henry killed Paul? I asked. I mean, he'd have motive if it was his life savings, and he does know this campground backwards and forwards.
Whoa, Nancy Drew.
He laughed and put his hands out.
You leave the questions and suspect list to me, unless you're trying to put the hit on someone else.
I told you that I didn't kill him. How was he killed? I asked.
1 shot, straight to the heart.
He pointed to his chest. Do you think it was quick? I asked, not wanting Paul to be in pain.
Does it matter? The man wasn't a good person.
Hank sounded a little bitter. His chest heaved up as he took a big breath.
I'm sorry. I apologize. No one deserves to be murdered, but this is a little too close to home.
I understand, I insisted archly. It's just that the person who did this isn't the person I fell in love with. I'm not saying I'm not bitter at him, and was half joking when I said I'd kill him first, but he was always good to me, and that had to be buried somewhere deep within him.
Well, I'm going to get out of your hair, but I'll be back.
He stood up, and his 6'3" frame towered over me.
Don't leave town, he warned. I'm a straight shooter, and you are my #1 suspect.
I went to protest, but he put his finger up to my mouth.
Shh,
he silenced me.
Your motive is perfect. Wife used to the lap of luxury, suddenly ripped out from under her. Her big house, fancy car, and rich lifestyle traded in for an RV where she has to move from her plush, gated community into a slum of a campground in a state she's never been to. The husband shows up after escaping jail, thinking his wife is going to take him back with open arms, and he's actually met with an angry wife and the whole of a gun that puts a blow to his chest after a big fight between them. The wife got her revenge, and how sweet it is.
He spoke with light bitterness. I don't even have a gun. My tone hardened as I retorted tartly.
That's why we are dragging the lake.
He pushed the RV door open. I stood behind him and looked across the lake where there were a few men in scuba gear.
See those men? He pointed to them. And that backhoe?
I nodded like I even knew what a backhoe was, but it was big and was dragging the front of its crane into the water.
While we've been in here talking and having coffee, those men got in and looked around. Now that they are finished, the backhoe will pull up anything and everything, like a gun,
he said with a coolly impersonal tone. It became apparent that he wanted to keep me busy while they did all this work without telling me, and I remembered some stuff like warrants on those TV shows. I own this campground, and I don't think I gave you permission to do that. I played hardball right back to him.
So, you do have an issue. Or you threw that gun into the lake after you shot him.
He pulled another paper out of his pocket.
You don't think I came here without a warrant, do you?
He flicked it open with one hand and gave it to me.
Don't underestimate me. I might live in Normal and have a camper here, but I'm pretty smart.
He tapped his temple. My like for him turned into an instant distaste of him.
Mae West, don't leave town.
He stepped out of the RV.
Oh, one more thing.
He held the pen up in the air.
I'm gonna need to see your phone records.
I've got nowhere to go and no one to call. I grabbed the handle. See you later, Detective Hank.
Detective Sharp,
he corrected before I dragged the door in, trying to slam it, but it didn't happen. I fell where I was standing. The tears stung the lid of my eyes. I tried so hard over the past few months not to cry or break down. As the tears streamed down my face and the sobs started shortly thereafter, I realized I wasn't crying for the fact that I was the FBI's #1 suspect. As much as I wanted to continue to hate Paul, I never wanted to see him dead. That was the last thought I remembered having before I fell asleep from exhaustion. 6. It wasn't the banjo or the cheering that should have woke me up. It was the saliva that had been pouring out of the corner of my mouth that made me open my eyes. I blinked a few times, and my reality had come back to me, only it had gotten dark. My stomach was growling, and my hair was plastered to my cheek. Not a pretty sight, Become that girl you used to be. I propped myself up on the floor where I'd fallen from my crying spell from earlier today, with a little more rest in my bones. You are used to living on your own. You've only been with Paul 5 years. What's your problem? Find that girl, I demanded of myself. The pep talk was good until I noticed the stained spots along the bottom edge of the RV couch and dirt in all the corners. Okay, so I've never been the best at cleaning, but I can do this, I said and pushed up to stand. It was that moment that I knew I was on my own. Before Paul floated up dead, I really hadn't grasped the thought that he wasn't coming back. Of course, I divorced him, but there was a tiny bit of hope that all of this was somehow going to work its way out, and he'd come back with a really big excuse as to why they thought he'd done it, plus give everyone back their money. His dead body confirmed the finality of it for me. By the sound of it, there was a party happening in the campground. I looked out the window and caught myself smiling when I noticed a few campfires dotted around the park. There was some banjo music, a little singing, and a lot of laughter. I sure could use some of that. The cleaning was going to have to wait. Besides, I didn't even have anything to clean with. I'd been able to make do with 1 roll of toilet paper and a few groceries that had now gone bad from me not hooking in the electric plug. But tomorrow was a new day, and I was going to make a plan. I always did. I headed back to the bedroom and grabbed a sweatshirt from the rest stop bag I'd purchased when I rolled over the Kentucky border and threw that on. I'd not gotten into the storage unit where Dottie said she'd put the boxes that were shipped from Stanley. I'm sure there were clothes in there for me to wear. Going to get them needed to be put on my to-do list. On my way to the front of the RV, I stopped in the small bathroom and bent down to look in the mirror while I brushed my hair. There was a knock on the door. "I'll be right there," I called and gave myself a good once-over before I flipped the bathroom light off and headed to the door, sure it was Dottie Swaggart. Besides Henry, she was the only person I knew in the campground, but I was determined to change that. "Can I help you?" I asked the young woman at the door. "I'm Bets Hager, and I've come with welcome food from the Normal Baptist Church Women's Group." She held out a casserole dish. I also spotted 2 brown bags on the ground next to her. Secretly, I wondered if she were going to offer up her cute cowboy boots. There was a jealous ping in my soul as my eyes scanned over her white, off-the-shoulder peasant top with a few bright flowers embroidered across the top. She tucked the front of the shirt into a pair of skinny jeans. She had cute, brown, wavy, chin-length hair with blunt bangs, which made me even more envious because I could never get my curls tame enough to wear bangs. "I think I've heard of you from the gals at the laundromat." I opened the door wide. "Come on in. Grab those bags, please." She pinched a smile. I grabbed them and held the door open for her. "Let me tell you." She walked up the steps and into the RV. She looked around, and her scared look didn't go unnoticed. "You won't find no better gals to chit-chat with than the laundry club. Now, where do you want these?" "Here is good." I put the brown bags down on the kitchen table and patted it. "It smells so good, and I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am for this." I started to laugh, and poor Bats looked at me like I was a fool. "You'll find some cleaning supplies in one of the bags." She continued to assess my cleanliness. At some point, I was going to have to take that seriously, because there was no way I could even begin to let Stanley bring potential buyers around right now. "You don't understand." I shook my head as I continued to laugh and point to the refrigerator. "I had no idea I was supposed to plug in electric cords. And then the cop who thinks I killed my ex," I bent over laughing, "he actually took time out from interrogating me to show me how." When I stood back up, tears were streaming down my face, and Bets's jaw was practically on the floor. Apparently, she didn't think it was as funny as I thought it was. "I'm sorry." I ran my hand through my curls and swallowed hard. I'm thinking I'm having a nervous breakdown. Well then, she perked right up. I've got just what you need. She reached into the bag and pulled out a cast-iron skillet. I've never seen one of those in person. I took it from her and was surprised how heavy it was. And we need these, and these. She pulled out chocolate chips, marshmallows, and graham crackers. She headed to the door. Let's go. Where? I asked. You've got dessert, and they've got the food. She pushed the door open, and when I hesitated, she stuck her head back in the door. You coming? Yeah, I nodded, not really sure what was going on, but I was hungry, and I wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, at least according to Detective Hank. She hurried down the gravel road and over to one of the fire pits with the sweets. I followed behind her and was met with several people with smiling faces. They all seemed to know each other, and I was happy to see that a few of them were Dottie, Abby, and Queenie. Well, if it ain't Mae West, Queenie grinned. This time she was wearing a jogging suit, minus the headband. What you got there? We've got skillet s'mores. Bats reached over to get the skillet from me. Oh, those are my favorite. Abby took the ingredients from Bats. Since you brought a dessert, you get to go around to all the campfires with a tin plate. Dottie handed me one with dents all in it. Fill it up with all the good food and dessert after. I stood there in amazement of their kindness to a stranger that had not been quite as giving as them. I didn't know you two lived here. I looked at Queenie and Abby. We don't. Abby shook her head. We just came for the food. Go on now and make you a plate before them Randall boys get here. They'll eat everything after they get home from whatever sport they're playing this season. Dottie shooed me towards the burning fire closest to us. I didn't know who the Randall boys were, so I'd have to look on the list Dottie had given me earlier of longtime campers to see the exact location of their RV. I hurried around the lake, and by the time I'd made it back to where I'd started, my plate was full, and so was my heart. Are you okay? Bets asked after I'd finished my plate full of food, sinking into one of the camping chairs where you just melt right on down into. I'm great and full. Why? I asked her. The fire flickered in front of us. Because you are smiling, a far feature from when I came to your door earlier. She snapped a graham cracker in half and dug it into the s'more dip that was in the cast-iron skillet over the fire. You know, when I pulled into the campground this morning, I thought my life was just over, when in reality, I think it's just beginning. I couldn't get over how these people had just accepted me into their community after what Paul had done to them. I'm sorry for what Paul did to the campground and the people who live here. All the gals from the laundry club smiled. I'm going to do my best to clean it up and make it a great place again. I know it's going to take money and I don't have it, but I'll take a side hustle to help. I nodded. I could use someone to help shelf the library books. I can't pay much, but it's something, Abby offered. That sounds perfect, I said. Is there one of those dummy books for RV owners? I think I can grab some books for you. Abby took a graham cracker and dipped it into the skillet with the melted chocolate chips and marshmallows. I can help clean up your RV, and on a budget, Dottie said. It's a mess. I forced a smile, hoping she didn't think her camper was what she'd called cleaned up. I heard that you were going to host a fundraiser. Bat stood up. I can take you to a few stores around here and get some items for cheap. Sounds perfect. I was on the verge of crying over all of their generosity. I'll pick you up in the morning around 10 a.m. Now, I've got to get home. She bent over and hugged me. My phone number is written on a piece of paper in one of the sacks. Call me if you need me. I guess we should give all our numbers to you, Queenie offered. Don't worry, Bets winked. I wrote them all down. I'll be. When you walked into the laundry club this afternoon, I never figured you to be one of us. I guess you are in our club now." Queenie lifted her graham cracker. "Welcome, Mae West." 7. It felt like I'd just laid my head down when the alarm went off. I'd set it for 8 a.m., which was the earliest I'd gotten up in a long time. But I had things to do before Bets picked me up to take me to town, and if I was going to make good on my promise to clean up the campground, I needed to get a move on it. My Keurig brewed while I jumped into the shower. I threw on the only pair of jeans I had and a white V-neck t-shirt. It was a very minimal look that I could get used to without fixing my hair and pulling it up in a ponytail or putting on any more than mascara and a swipe of lip gloss. I had my cup of coffee and I was out the door with the papers Dottie had given me. The sun was shining, and it made for a perfect morning to walk around the campground and put names from our paper with the campers. The first thing to being an owner, in my opinion, would be to get to know the people who were renting from you and see how much they owed. I knocked on the door of the Randalls. They had a yellow and white striped camper with a little awning over a sitting area.
"It's early."
The man stood, bare-chested, with his arms over his head in a big stretch and yawn. His brown hair was full and messy.
"Can I help you?"
"It's 8 a.m. You look too old to be at school. What about work?"
"Oh, crap. Are you with the CPS?"
His brows furrowed and framed his crystal blue eyes.
"Boys, get your clothes on. It's time to get to school."
"CPS?" I asked. "No, I'm Mae West."
"Yeah, and I'm John Wayne."
He cocked a sideways smile that I'd love to have smacked off his face if it weren't charming. "According to Dottie's paper, you must be Ty Randall. I'm Mae West, the owner, and I need to collect your lot fee." I held the paper out to show him. "In fact, you're a couple of months late, and I'm going to have to mark right here that this is a warning."
"Whoa."
He put his hands out.
"Listen, Mae West."
He strung out my name.
"Dottie and I have an agreement. Go and mark all you want, but it means nothing."
"The agreements Dottie made aren't valid because she's not the owner." I turned around to face the campground. "Look at this place. It's because of people not paying their lot rent that it looks like this." I wanted to ask about his kids and his wife. I bet he laid around all day and made her work.
"You're the real deal. I heard about a new owner or something."
He gave me the once-over. "I'd like last month's rent by the end of the week. If you don't have it, then consider yourself evicted." I turned on the toes of my shoes. "And there'll be a new lease agreement to sign too," I said over my shoulder and made a note in the file to look up lease agreements when I helped Abby at the library today. Then I saw a few of those pedal boats stacked up next to his camper, along with stray balls and a few toys. "Get all of these things out of here too," I said, and kept going. "I'm trying to make this place presentable for the summer tourists." I wasn't going to say it was easy, but I'd made it to everyone's camper but Henry's. He didn't owe me any money, but he did owe me an explanation to why Detective Hank thinks he could have killed Paul. Henry was outside picking up the pieces of charred wood from the fire pit and throwing them into another lit campfire. He had his kettle hanging over top the flame.
"Good morning,"
he greeted me. He gestured to his fire.
"Would you like a refill?"
"I'd love one." I walked over and held my cup out for him as he took the kettle off the fire and filled me up. "This is the best coffee. I had no idea how much better the food tasted last night than regular oven-cooked food."
"Oh, no. That means you've got the bug. Once you get bitten by the camping life, you can't go back."
He smiled and sat down, patting the chair next to him.
"Have a seat, and tell me what you've been doing door to door."
Dottie gave me the list of campers and what they owe. I can't believe they'd not paid. Some have been months. I sipped on the coffee. If I can get the money out of them, that'd be enough to fix something around here. My list of to-dos had grown, and all of them were number 1, so I just made a list of do's, and hoping to cross some of those off.
I saw you over at Ty Randall's camper. That boy's tougher than the back end of a shooting gallery.
I cocked a brow and wondered if Abby could also get me a dummy's book for Henry's language. What did he actually mean by what he said about Ty? Was Ty mean? Someone I didn't want to make mad?
What's on your list? He asked.
I'd like to get the lake cleaned up, because in order to host a fundraiser, the lake is the big draw for everyone to gather around. Then the dock, and maybe get a few fish to stock it, I said, as I put the comment about Ty out of my head.
That's a big order, and a costly one, Henry responded.
I'd have to use his expertise on what the cost would be.
You're looking at $5,000 per acre to get it stocked. It's a 5-acre pond all the way around.
He used his hand to make a circle. Gosh, that much? I questioned. He nodded. Maybe we can just have the fundraiser with music from some of the campers and food. So maybe we can just clean the lake and fix up the tiki bar.
You're looking at about $1,000 if you use Alvin Dieter's down at the Feedin' Seed.
He gave a little more reasonable number, which I figured I could just use some of that sock money. Alvin Dieter's. I wrote down his name in my file. Good to know.
I can get some things together to help fix up the tiki bar. It won't be perfect, but it'll be sturdy enough for a one-night fundraiser, Henry said.
Henry? I scooted up to the edge of the seat. Can I ask you why you gave Paul your savings to invest?
You know about that? He asked.
My lawyer gave me a list of people Paul scammed, and you were on there. I wondered if he was going to tell me. 2 police cars pulled into the campground.
Scammed? He swindled me out of the money,
he responded sharply, abandoning all pretenses, and watched as the police cars pulled up to the crime scene. They'd not taken down the crime scene tape, and we were careful not to go near it last night during the campfire supper.
He told me that if I gave him the money, he'd see to it that part of this campground was mine one day. We'd be partners, he'd said. Since I lived here and he didn't, I could be the silent partner, and he'd funnel me the money.
There was a look of disgust that drew across his face as his nostrils flared when he turned back to look at me.
It disgusts me. Do you know how hard it is to save $2,000?
I was finding out real fast just how hard it was.
I'm not young, and I've got nothing. The past few months, I was so happy, thinking that I was going to retire with something, part of this park. Then the FBI showed up here and told me the news. I hate that SOB.
He spit on the ground.
I'm sorry, Mae. I shouldn't have spit that way. Not good to do in front of a lady.
You're fine. I shook my head. Henry, did you see Paul when he showed up here the other day?
Hank asked me the same thing. I remember when he was knee-high to a grasshopper, running around here with his grandfather. We were friends, you know, me and his grandfather.
He looked out over the lake. You didn't answer my question. I pushed him.
Like I told him, his grandfather is rolling over in his grave at the way Hank is acting. We're all one, and we look out for each other around here. Now, I've got to get to work on that tiki bar.
He got up and walked away, leaving me standing there without a clear answer to my question. Beep, beep. The sound of the horn and the gravel spitting up underneath tires took my attention away from Henry. Bets Hager was wildly waving at me with a big grin on her face. I gestured her to go to my camper. I needed to get my purse and a few things to take with me. I nearly fell over my own feet as I rubbernecked across the lake, looking at the crime scene to see what the police were doing. A couple of them just stared at me, while the other two seemed to be scouring the scene for more evidence. "I can't believe it's already 10, I said to her when I met her down at my RV. "Let me put this in the camper and grab something. I'll be right out." I hurried in and put the file on the table, but took the piece of paper that I'd stuck in my purse where I'd been making my notes and lifted the mattress off the bed. I grabbed Paul's sock with the money in it and took out a few thousand, putting that into my bag too. "Sorry about that. I had to put my file up, and you won't believe the people who owe money who live here," I said as I hoisted myself up into her minivan. "Yes, I would," she agreed. "Dottie is a sucker for a sad story, and I'd heard that Paul was going to give her the boot as the manager." "How did you know that?" I asked. "Mae, Normal is a very small town. Gossip spreads around here like wildfire. Sometimes I get cleaning jobs with the rich ladies in town. I never know what I'm going to hear." She pulled the shift in gear and took off towards town. "Cleaning jobs?" I asked. "I clean houses on the side, especially the elderly from the church. It's a hot commodity around here." She looked over her shoulder. "Look back there." I did. "I don't have children. I have this minivan to carry all my cleaning supplies." She had a lead foot, and before she even finished her story about how she had to help supplement her and her husband's income because being a preacher didn't pay much. "Well, not much in Normal." She wagged her finger. "You know all them people you were saying didn't pay their lot fee? They don't tithe either. But they're the first ones asking for a handout from the church. And God love Lester. He'd give the clothes off his back for these people." "Lester?" I questioned. "Lester, my husband. Your preacher." She gripped the wheel and turned onto Main Street. "I don't go to church." I wanted to establish that right off. "You will," she said with the utmost of confidence. "We're here at the second-hand store. There's some really good deals in here. You said something about a beach party-themed fundraiser, and there were some things I saw in here a few days ago that'd be perfect." "After we leave here, and before you take me to the library, do you think we can stop by the Feed and Seed?" I asked. "I sure can." She nodded and jerked the wheel, parking the van in front of a store called the Tough Nickel. "It's right there next to the shop we're going into, and," she pointed out the windshield ahead of us, "the library is over there, and there's a diner over there. Plus, the laundry club is just around the corner." She turned to look at me. "Didn't you see all this stuff when you were doing laundry?" "You know, I hate to say it, but I was just trying to get some clean clothes and used my GPS to take me there. I didn't pay much attention to anything other than parking the RV." I looked out the window. "It's a great little town. We do what we can to keep it clean and desirable, just in case we get new residents, like yourself." She clapped her hands in her lap. "Listen, I'm sure we are about the same age, or at least in the same age range. When Lester told me that he was thinking on taking a pastoring position in Normal, Kentucky, I was so upset. Of course, Normal wasn't the ideal church we wanted, but I opened my heart, and I can't imagine anywhere I'd rather be." She smiled. "When or if we do have children, I think Normal will be the perfect place to raise them." I just never imagined, even a week ago, that I'd be here. Not that I'm better than anyone, it's just that there's not even a place to work out. Like I'd ever worked out. I truly wanted to say a makeup counter, but I'm sure the local drugstore had something. "Yes, Queenie teaches jazzercise in the church's undercroft. It's a lot of fun. You're going to love it." She pulled the keys from the ignition. "I'm sure you're wanting to fix up the campground, just enough for you to sell it. But I'm just asking that you keep your heart open. I think you're going to be surprised." Bets didn't give me a chance to deny her claim, though it was true. It's not that I didn't like Normal. It just wasn't my normal,
and I wasn't even sure what my normal was. But I was going to fix the place up and let the residents live in a place they can call home and make sure they didn't skimp out on the rent. I would sell the place and leave the campground in much better shape than I'd found it. That much I knew for sure. I don't have a time frame. I just want to give the people back their homes. I want tourists to come back and stay at the campground. I got out and stood on the sidewalk and took notice that the town was exactly like one of those small towns you'd see on TV. How charming. I pointed to the median in the middle of the street. We gather here a lot on Sunday afternoon after church for impromptu picnics. There was a twinkle in her eye. No matter what this town has gone through, we have always come together. Now you can come and see what it's all about. Sounds good. I got the distinct impression that Bats could tell that I wasn't planting any sort of roots in Normal. I thought we'd stop by the Tough Nickel thrift shop because they have some really great lights I think you can use. Plus, if you bat your eyes at Buck, he just might give you a bigger discount. She blinked several times and laughed again. I'd like to stop in at the Feed and Seed to see about some sod for around the lake, I told her while we walked to our destination and headed into the building. I was charmed by the old chippy buildings. Instead of having big signs, there were small wooden and hand-painted signs with the names of the shops. Yesterday, while I was trying to find a place to park the RV, I looked around, but walking the streets makes the town seem so charming. I bet it's beautiful here at night. I was going to make it a point to come down here. It's a sweet town, and it will charm the pants right off you. She pointed our way to the front door of the Tough Nickel. Cute store, too. Smile. She pointed her phone at me and took a photo. Hashtag Mae West is fixing up hashtag Happy Trails Campground. You too? I laughed and pulled the door of the shop open. Abby told me to make sure I put some stuff on social media. She walked in before me. Inside, the building was just as cute as the outside. People I know pay a lot of money to have brick exposed walls. I twirled around and looked. Every wall was brick and not covered. The hardwood floors were in great shape, with large oriental rugs laid all over and in no particular order. There were big pieces of antique furniture and some art pieces. There's no way I can afford anything in here, I said, and checked the price tag of a topiary tree as we walked in. Buck, yoo-hoo, Bets called out. We're going to the attic.
Bets?
An older man with coal-black hair and a tall, slender frame came from a different direction.
Who's your friend?
Mae West. She's the new owner of Happy Trails, and I think I saw some really cute party lights up in the attic. Mae is going to fix up the campground, and she's going to have a fundraiser. Bets patted his shoulder. It's going to be so good for the community to have that up and running again. I know Lester and I are excited to grow our congregation, and I'm sure we can count on you to be there with an open wallet. Wow, I thought, as Bets just went on and on. She was good because before I could finish my thought, and before I could bat my eyes, which I was looking forward to, Buck had already agreed for me to take what I needed.
My donation.
He gestured to the stairs.
You know your way, and if you need something, I'm in the back, restaining an old chest we got from an estate sale. Just holler.
Thank you, I said, and put my hand out to seal the deal.
Mae West.
He dragged me into a bear hug.
Don't you know we hug around here? Especially now that you're a new citizen.
I heard. I grinned and returned the hug.
Now that we got that out of the way, welcome to Normal. Now, what do you know about that murder out there?
He crossed his arms. It was my ex-husband. He escaped from prison, and someone killed him, I blurted out.
On second thought, I'll come up the stairs with you.
His brows narrowed.
You were married to Paul West? He was a bad guy.
We can go up. You go on back and finish that staining. Bets's voice cracked.
Nope. He's a crook, and she might be too.
Buck shook a finger at me. She's not a crook, are you? Bets's face grew serious. Of course I'm not. I had no idea Paul even owned Happy Trails, nor did I know that he was scheming everyone we knew and some people we loved. I could tell by Bets's fidgeting that I shouldn't have opened my mouth so much about the murder.
You didn't kill him? He questioned. I mean, everyone around town said that you were here, but I didn't put two and two together. My noggin isn't as good as it used to be putting things together. I'm not saying you didn't have good cause, but I'm saying that we've been doing just fine before you stepped foot here.
You know what? Bets patted the air. I'll come back for the lights. Mae has to get to the library. They hired her part-time. She jerked me by the elbow and dragged me out of the shop. What are you doing? Trying to get run out of town? She huffed and puffed. People around here are very protective of each other, and you have to gain their trust. It's not like he wasn't going to find that out. Paul and I have the same last name. It didn't take Detective Hank to go around telling everyone for them to figure out that the man who'd apparently taken this entire town for granted, wife, was in town and living here. Paul did me just as bad as he did everyone else. Just so you know, Buck is going to be on the phone with every store owner now. The news of you running around gathering things for the fundraiser is going to be all over town before you get home tonight, she said. There was a man standing under the Dieter's Feed and Seed sign. He put his hands on his hips and looked left and then right, staring at us. Or the news is going to spread faster than we can get to the Feed and Seed. She nodded her head at the man. That's Alvin Dieters, and by the glare on his face, he knows exactly who you are. The closer we got to Alvin, the more I could see the disgust on his face had extended to the lines around his mouth. His eyes narrowed more and more the closer we got. My inner voice told me that it had to do with who I was and how I was related to the man who'd obviously done more damage to the town than just let Happy Trails go downhill. Alvin had a big cowboy hat pulled way down over his brows. There was no denying he owned the right store. Anything dealing with farming equipment and outside. His blue jeans, plaid shirt, cowboy boots, and big silver belt screamed it.
Bets.
He gave her one of those good old Baptist nods that I'd seen plenty times when I lived in Kentucky.
You must be Paul West's wife.
He dragged his hat off his head, exposing a light brown head of hair.
I might be in my 50s, but I always do what my mama told me to do. Be nice to the lady, and I'm gonna do that.
He spoke right to me.
But I can't say I'm happy about you being here and trying to make good on his debts or even cover up you killing him.
Mr. Dieters, I cleared my throat. I'm sorry if that's the impression you got of why I'm here. In all honesty, I was coming here to take a little vacation because I'd gotten the impression this was a vacation spot, not what it truly is. I decided to leave out my colorful wording of the campground. I didn't know about Happy Trails or Normal until a couple of days ago. I do feel bad, and I'm going to make it good. I'm not my husband. I'm Mae West. I sucked in a deep breath and pulled my shoulders back. And I didn't kill him. I'm not going to lie and say that it had never crossed my mind over the past few months, but I could never bring myself to do anything like that to anyone, no matter what they'd done to me or anyone else. He shifted his eyes from me to Bets. Now, I've come here because I need some help bringing the place back to life for a fundraiser, so I can help put people's lives back together. I couldn't bring myself to even think about how he and everyone else in the town had obviously thought I was there to take them for more money, and that I'd killed Paul. I had to get this fundraiser moving. From what I hear, you're the man to see about cleaning up a lake and possibly getting some sod. My problem is that I don't have any money.
Why should I help you when I don't trust you?
He slowly brought his hat back up to his head and placed it on. Mr. Dieters. It appeared that I had to go into much greater detail than I'd already done. I had no idea my ex-husband was swindling people out of their retirement and livelihood. He got me, too. I'm here on good faith to make the campground a better place for not only the residents who call it home, but for those who want to come to Normal as tourists, like they used to. From what I'd gathered on the brochure, Normal was a big spot for antiquing and campers during the festivals. I stood there begging my case, because he was the only person in town that could help me fix the lake and stock it, not to mention the sod. Bats quickly dismissed herself. It must be nice being a preacher's wife and having God as a good excuse to leave, while I was there stuck in the fire of you-know-where.
I don't know. You come in here and don't have a dime, asking for credit. From what I remember, your husband,
he started to say. Ex, I corrected him.
Your ex-husband came into the diner down there and tried to sell us the same song and dance you're selling. I'm gonna fix up the campground, he said. I'm gonna bring back your retirement. Just give me what you've got, and I'll turn this town back around. Do you know them Randall boys have nothing?
He glared at me. Randall boys? The image of the Randall man I met with his shirt off was still vivid in my mind.
Yeah. Ty lives in the campground raising his brothers because his mama died of cancer. And when your ex-husband,
Alvin was good at exaggerating ex-husband,
had taken their poor old daddy for all his money, he went into a heart attack and damn near died. He's all laid up in the county nursing home, trying to learn to feed himself again. Now Ty had to move back to Normal from his big city life to come here and keep the diner open and raise his brothers.
I didn't know that. My mouth dried because any saliva found its way into my tear ducts. I bit back the urge to cry. Paul did some very bad things, but I'm not going to do that.
You're more than welcome to go to the bank and see if they'll give you credit to come back in here and purchase what you need. As for giving you anything until you can pay me back from some funds of the fundraiser, I just can't do that.
His eyes bore into me. I don't blame you. I nodded and realized this was going to take a lot more than batting eyes for the citizens of Normal to forgive me. I'll go to the bank. Can you tell me where the diner is?
Across the street and a few doors down.
He crossed his arms over his chest. The tense jaw never relaxed. Thank you for your time, I said softly, and excused myself from the store.